Okay, notice the difference between this one and the previous two problems that we have drawn. Actually, not even this one. This one had a vertical shift of -2. This one has a vertical shift of 0. So we can go ahead and say, oh, look, +0, +0. All right, fantastic. So if you want to go ahead and write things that you know, you can. Drop the pen. We can write down the amplitude. Not with that pen, apparently. We can't write amplitude with that one. All right, I'm going to make it work. This is going to work. No, it's not. Switching to purple. The amplitude is something we don't know. The period is something we don't know. Whoops, if I could spell, that'd be great. Period is something we don't know. And the vertical shift is something, oh, we do know, it's 0. Which means if we graph this, when we graph this, we're going to have a midline of 0, okay? So this graph is exactly like this graph, only it has a negative in the front. What do negatives in the front do? Okay, if it was a parabola, if you had a parabola, and I'm just going to doodle here for a second. If you had y equals x squared, you'd have this little guy right here, and it would be a parabola that would be a lot more symmetric than that. But if you had y equals -x squared, it would take it and flip it over. So all your positives become negative. If you had negatives, which you wouldn't here, but they would become positives. Let's do it. So we still have the same situation with the highest being at 1, the lowest being at -1. So let's draw that. You will never go above this line at y equals 1. You'll never go below this line at y equals -1. And instead of starting this graph, it does start at the origin, but instead of starting it by going up and then back down, because of this negative, it's going to go down and then back up. All right, I'm putting 3 dots here, 0, pi, and 2 pi, because that's where it's going to cross the x-axis. So we're going to go down and then back up, and then up and then back down. Not the prettiest graph I've ever drawn. We can draw a couple more periods. There we go. That's a little bit off, but we'll go with it. There's that one. All right. Fantastic. Okay. Well, the amplitude is, okay, you might say, well, it's -1. Okay, amplitude is a measurement of distance. Distance is not negative. So from the middle to the top or the middle to the bottom, it's 1, even though this was a -1. So here's the shortcut. The number in the front, -1 in this case, take the absolute value of that, and that is your amplitude. So as we look ahead, amplitude is going to be 2 in this case, or 3/2, 1.5 in this case. The period in this case, that did not change. That's not going to change for the next few problems. But the period in this case is going to be 2 pi. So 2 pi. All right, let's do the next 3, and let's start going a little faster. This graph is this graph, only shifted up 1. So now we're going to have a midline there, and the -1 in the front, and we can say, oh, there's an amplitude of 1. That's fine. We'll have a -1 in the front, which means we'll go up 1 from the middle, and then down 1 from the middle, which puts us on the x-axis on the lower end of this. And we're going to have the amplitude, the period, and the vertical shift. The amplitude of this one is also 1. The period of this is 2 pi, and at this point you're probably like, well, how do you know it's 2 pi? That hasn't changed yet, and you're going to see it when it does, okay? So we're going to hang around with this and just take my word for it. It's going to be 2 pi, or 360 degrees if we're doing degrees, but it's going to be 2 pi until it's not, and you'll know when it's not. And the vertical shift is 1, but also keep in mind that this starts not by going up. Notice I'm pointing at a negative. It starts by going down. So what would normally start at 0, 0 is going to start at 0, 1. The full cycle, the full period, is going to end at 2 pi. And at the halfway mark, you're back in the middle. But you will not go up and then down. You're going to go down and then up. And there we go. And that ends at 4 pi. And then we can do the same thing here. There it is. Okay, now things change a little bit with our amplitude. So with the amplitude in this case, we're going to have an amplitude of 2. So let's write that out. Amplitude is 2. The period is 2 pi, and the vertical shift is the understood 0, so slightly useless, but the midline, the vertical shift, is the x-axis. The amplitude is 2 now, so the highest I'll ever get is up here. The lowest I'll ever get is down here. And we will begin at the origin and end at 2 pi. Again, don't worry about where the period comes from. I'm going to show you when it's not 2 pi, you'll know it, you'll see it. It'll be obvious. And the vertical shift, of course, is 0. So halfway through the period, you're back where you started. And this is a positive 2. Okay, so basically this is a vertical stretch. This graph right here is this graph, only this one's going to have a vertical stretch of 2. So this is going to go, and you can see it on Desmos if you type it in. So there we go. But if you don't type it in on Desmos, and I'm a big fan of Desmos, but if you don't type it in, you'll learn better by looking and seeing where the things are and how to manipulate them. Okay, this is the end of the other period, so there's that. And then there's that. All right, and then it keeps going. There we go. We could have done that with the others as well. What fun that would be. Be here all day. All right, the next one is the same thing, only we have -3/2 in the front. Well, that means the amplitude is negative. No, amplitude is never negative. I'm going to just treat it like 3/2. That's the same as 1.5, of course. Period is 2 pi. Vertical shift is 0, also known as midline, so a little useless, but the midline is the x-axis. The amplitude is 1.5. You'll never go above this line. You'll never go below this line. That's 1.5. And the period is 2 pi. So you start at the origin, you end at 2 pi, halfway through, you're back where you started. And if you're wondering where that dot's coming from, I'm going to go way back to the beginning of the lesson. It's that dot right there. Start, end, middle. Okay, that's going to change when we get to a graph of cosine in a couple minutes. All right, so what we're going to do is start by going down and then back up, and we've made one complete cycle, one period. So keep drawing if you would like, and I do choose to do so. So here's the next period, and then we will draw this one as well. There are a lot of practical applications for this, a tremendous amount. There are a lot of things in the real world, I hate that phrase, but in the real world, there are a lot of things that are on these cycles that go up and down, number of daylight hours per day over a year. Oh goodness, all kinds of stuff. The tide that comes in and out, just so many things.